All right. Well, we are very, very blessed here today. Again, Meristem team, and it's kind of cool. We've been at it as long as Mitch and Rob and some of the rest of the team. You know, you actually do have some connections out there in the marketplace, and I can honestly tell you, having a chance to work with most of these folks in other environments, you've got absolutely an outstanding panel here today. First of all, Jeff Sommers, who you've already met. Thank you, Jeff, for being up here twice. That's double duty. I'm sure you're getting paid twice. Right? Yeah. Okay. He's an owner partner in Wysocki family companies. They do a lot of things. Obviously, major league potato growers, but also certainly other specialty crops. Don Preusser with Vane.Ag. Don's all about risk management. I can't go. I would tell you, don't go to any meeting, especially where there's farm market in the farmers in the audience, where risk management is a major topic. And it does separate, frankly, the average from the outstanding producer that actually understands how to utilize risk management tools. So, Don, thank you so much for being here. Next is Dan Basse. This guy is an economist. The reason I say that is he actually says things that make sense. Right? And I mean, truly, I've had an opportunity to work with Dan several times, and just an absolutely serious. I'm not trying to embarrass him, but a brilliant guy. He really is. He's really amazingly smart. And also, Rob has promised that he's going to tell you all when to sell your corn. Okay, so if you learn nothing else, he's going to tell you the day, the hour. And then our first panelist, and we've asked each of them, by the way, to share about 5 minutes or so, maybe a little bit more, kind of their view of the economy, their view of what's going on with farm policy, and then we're going to open it up to questions. Sara Wyant, I am proud to say, first and foremost, she's a personal friend. I'm always a little selfish about that, Sara. But Sara leads the organization called AgriPulse, and they truly do have the pulse of what's going on, certainly domestically, also globally, but especially in Washington, D.C. And she is one of the people that tries to make what's going on up there at least somewhat sensical, right? So, Sara, I want to give you the clicker, and if you want to start us off, please welcome Sara Wyant.
Thank you very much, Dave, and to Mitch and to Rob and all of you here. I'm so excited to be with this distinguished panel and to be visiting with you. And I don't know if we can really make sense of what's happening in Washington, D.C. right now, but we're gonna try to give you a quick hit of some of the things that are happening on the political environment, the legislative environment, and the regulatory environment. So let's go as fast as I can. I can tell you the political environment is a mess. That's pretty simple, concise, right? There's a very tough situation for both Democrats and Republicans, and part of that is because we've got some new leadership. They're very good new leaders, but they are new. There's so many new people right now in Washington, D.C., and a lot of them don't know the difference between a corn and soybean plant. Let me tell you, it starts there. We had some people a while back that were sharing with me, called into an office on a guy who works on the House Ag Committee and was complaining about the aquifer in their area. It was the Ogallala aquifer in Kansas. And the staffer said, well, you know, you're saying it's dry. What's the problem? Why can't you solve it? And he said, well, there's nothing we can do right now with all this drought situation. And the staffer said to him, have you tried Vaseline? If that doesn't underscore the lack of knowledge about what's happening in agriculture, nothing else will.
You truly can't make that up.
No. Wow. So one of the problems that we have, of course, is that with these new leaders, there's a need for education, and we also have to appreciate the fact that there's very thin margins. So in the Republican Party, they've taken the House again, but Kevin McCarthy, did anybody watch how many times it took for him to get the vote for being majority leader? 15 votes. So you think about the problem that he had just getting Republicans to support him. And that's the same problem we're going to have when we go into a new farm bill. There are very thin margins. So there's, Democrats still retain the majority in the Senate, but Republicans gained it in the House, but it's still very problematic to get anything done. So we're going to go into a farm bill. The legislative front says we should be having a new farm bill this year. It expires every 5 years. We should be writing it. We've been having listening sessions all over the country, but there's no draft in sight. You should be thinking about talking to members of Congress about what should be in the Farm Bill, because there could be some implications for your products. Right now, there's 12 different titles. It covers everything from commodities to risk management, which Don will talk to you about a little later. And also it covers everything from like rural development, funding for water and sewer in your small towns. So it's a very vast farm bill. And for the first time, it's going to be over $1 trillion in spending, which means it's got a target on its back with all the fiscal conservatives. The people that had trouble voting for Kevin McCarthy as Speaker also don't want to vote for a farm bill. They think there is too much debt. And if you saw what happened this week with the downgrade of the credit of the United States of America, there are a lot of other people that think that too. So there's problems that are going to revolve around the fiscal conservatives that want to perhaps support farmers and farm country, but don't want to spend the money.
And are you saying when they go after it, they'll go after the 18%, not the 82 in SNAP?
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
They're going to go after everything. Republicans will go after SNAP, but on the Democratic side, they're not going to let that happen. So they're going to go after all the farm part of the farm bill. Just want to hit on two other things real quickly, so I have time for my other panelists. The Secretary of Vilsack has announced a series of climate-smart projects. I think he's doing everybody a favor, and here's why. He's giving people time to do these demonstration projects that collect data and can demonstrate how you're being more sustainable and better for the environment. These partnerships are involving almost every major trade association in the United States, from the pork board to the corn growers, the soybean association, all the specialty crop folks. They all want to be collecting data so they can prove what is happening in farm country is really a good thing, that we are doing wonderful things for the climate and the environment. So these things have gotten some pushback from some Republicans because he's using the Commodity Credit Corporation to fund them, but I think it's going to be a good thing to watch and to see what we can demonstrate as a result of these projects that have been funded with over $3 billion in CCC funds. And last but not least, this is our friend, the EPA Administrator, Michael Regan. And he's really a pretty nice guy, but he's got an awesome task in front of him. And that is that he has Democrats who have supported President Biden and would like to get rid of all your crop protection chemicals. And he's got other folks who say, hey, we need these things. How do we make it work? And he's got a lot of environmental organizations who are suing the EPA every day. We reported this week that it's gotten to be a really bad situation when it comes to the Endangered Species Act. When I first started writing about some of these issues in the 1980s, there was a saying that you could shoot them, shovel them, and then shut up about them when you found an endangered species on your property. Those days are long gone. We're tracking over 1,000 species right now, and EPA is out with new strategies that could prevent you from using crop protection chemicals in certain areas. It could require you to have more mitigation strategies. And all along, you know, the agency is saying, hey, we don't have enough people to police this. We can't be out on every farm looking at whether or not you applied X or Y and how close it was to a certain waterway. But the courts have had hardly any lenience for their argument on this. So we're going to continue to watch this for you and make sure that you can have at least a leg up to be aware of the situation and to be watchful of that and to be weighing in, hopefully, with some of your public comments. So with that, Dave, I'm going to switch it on over.
Yeah, Dan, if you would, we're just going to keep right on going. Dan, focus on the economy.
That's great, David, and I hope you'll ask Sarah at some point who's going to be the Republican and Democratic nomination, because
that's
I'm interested in that also. Listen, more for less is the theme of the day here. Thank you for all having me. I'm Dan Basse, and I just want to see, I'm going to try to distill an economic outlook in about 7 to 10 minutes, if that works. And it answers Rob's question. Today is not the day to sell corn, okay? We're not selling it today. We're going to talk about when we should sell it, but I really want to jump into of what's going on here and where we're at. The reason the markets have come down, if you will, in Chicago and around the world is because of this thing called Brazil. If you look at Brazilian exports here to the left, you can see how aggressive they have been. If David and I were 20 years younger, we would look at Brazil very strongly as setting up shop because it is the next coming of agriculture. I have an office in Sao Paulo. We spend a lot of time there. If you haven't visited Brazil, you need to. But notice the stagnation to the right on what I would say U.S. agricultural exports because of Brazil. All within a matter of a decade, Brazil has taken the crown of being the world's largest soybean and corn exporters. I never thought they would get corn, but there's that crop called safrinha, which in Portuguese means little. It's no longer little. They will plant corn after soybeans for as far as you can see. And if as I said, going forward, I think Brazil has more weather importance than we in the Midwest for the markets going forward. And you can see the trends there as I lay out. Now, here's a slide I want to leave with you to really distill where I think we are today. Commodities are in a super cycle, okay? I think commodity markets are something that's going to be safe. Now, what's happened in the last 9 months is world central banks have been raising rates in the United States a record amount, which has been that hammer that's hit demand. Demand has come down, and we've really compressed demand, which is why commodities. But here's what I worry about. You farmers are doing the best, and I'm now talking globally. This is global coarse grain yields of those crops per capita, all right? So if I look at what farmers have been doing for years and years and years, and all of you, is you treat crops like your firstborn child. That's what we do in farming. And so as you can see backwards since the 1970s to where we are today, that treatment, if you will, has caused global grain yields per capita to just keep rising and rising and rising. The last 6 years, not so much. And so we at AgResource are really concerned, what's going on? I know you haven't changed your practices as farmers. What's the difference? And as we started looking at global, now this is global, this isn't Waukesha, Wisconsin, or LaSalle County, Illinois. This is different. World grain yields have stagnated by what we see as changing weather patterns. Again, I'm not a guy that believes, if you will, in climate change. And the reason I say that is we have 140 years of weather data that we can trust over 5 billion. We don't know if it's man, we don't know if it's God, we don't know what happens. But we just know that weather is changing. So when I look at this, there's a lot of things called heat going on. And when I look at world ocean temperatures today, we have the warmest oceans that we have ever seen in recorded history. Now, again, that's not a long time, but we all can sit back and admit that weather is changing. To a degree, we don't know, but I think as you think about crop yields, a term called heatflation will get more and more media press as we go forward. We can breed in drought tolerance to some degree, but we really have trouble with a lot of this heat that's going forward. So with that, I went to the UN about a year ago, and I spent time in Rome, and I said, what is a food crisis? Where are we today? So when I look at per capita grain and oilseed stocks, you can see that on the chart to your left. As you look at that, we put that blue line there. And that's what we came up with in the UN in terms of what is a crisis, and we measure it as pounds of grain per person. Again, corn, soybeans, wheat, and a lot of these grains are the pillars of the food chain. That's what we build on. So we are not at a crisis today. We are kind of looking over the edge. But it's not going to take us much to push us to that crisis. And when you look at what I call global corn, wheat, and soybean stocks-to-use ratios of the major exporters, that's the amount of grain available to the trade and to consume in Africa and all these countries every day, notice that we're sitting at a record low on wheat and very low levels on corn and soybeans. So prices are down today because of Brazil, but I want to inflect a view. When you look at Chicago, it has been a summer of volatility. The market's gone up and down. Just a week ago, soybeans were $1 a bushel higher than where they are today. That's volatility. And that's what farmers, you all need to measure as you go forward. Now, in the background of this volatility is also a guy named Putin. And Putin's out there, if you will, trying to, of course, manage the Black Sea grain situation, what's all happening in the war against Ukraine. Now, last year, Putin signed up for the grain accord, which opened up the corridor. Russia and Ukraine combined export a record amount of grain in a war. Also contributing factor to why world wheat prices came down. Now that deal is off for the moment. Putin is bombing Ukraine. And of course the people and farmers, clients that I have in Ukraine, they are struggling mightily. I think in another year, most of those farmers will not have the financial wherewithal to plant crops. And you can see in the other chart here, seedings and grain production, or harvested hectares, if you will, 2.47 acres in a hectare, are now in decline in Ukraine. The longer the war goes on, the more pestilence and more problems Ukrainian farmers will have. And they are, of course, a key exporter. China bought 11 million tons of corn from Ukraine last year. Where's it going to get that corn going forward? So lastly, the one chart I also wanted to leave with and embed in your memory, if I could, is I decided to go back and have my staff plot world interest rates, okay? But we didn't stop just like a few years ago. We went back to 3000 BC. So this is 5,000 years of world interest rates, starting way back with the Romans and the Greeks and all the way forward. We took it forward, but the point I wanted to leave with you is this. In 5,000 years, how many times have interest rates been at zero, the place where we got used to them over the last 16 years? 37 years. So is it a good bet to think that interest rates are going to go back to where they were at 0 to 0.25%? No. I think we're back to the old normal. I think rates are now going to be between, let's call it 3 and 7% for the foreseeable future. We have a new asset class called money. We now get to go to the bank and get 5% yields. Isn't that nice? But this changes the whole thought process of the world. This changes asset class allocations. This is going to have big ramifications when we go forward. So think about this. We are not going back to 0% interest rates any day soon. Think about inflation holding at 3% and the Fed having a tough job over a long period of time. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Turn it over to Don.
Thank you. Take it away, Don.
All right. So I'm going to talk about risk in a way that you might not normally hear someone from the insurance industry talk about it. I'm not here to tell you about what's wrong or right with the federal crop program. I would note that from Sarah's comments, there is a lot of pressure on the premium subsidy side of the federal crop program. And so we'll have to see how that plays out. It's come up every year that the Farm Bill comes around. And so much like the past, there'll probably be something worked out around it. But it is a growing pressure for those that depend upon the federal crop programs. So I have a slide here that is really intended to frame up and level set this notion of production risk and the types of insurance solutions that also ultimately will come to bear to protect those that are in the production channel. And I'll get to that in a moment. But what's important about this kind of framing up is to think about production history and the risk of production history. And if you look at the on the left side, you can see how production risk has improved, over the years, but it has the pressure that will always be upon it from the climate. Weather has been largely the biggest driver of risk in production risk. Now, there's a whole lot of other things that go on around that, and that comes up in the area of this green box, the value of innovation. So think about all of this as different pressures working on each other within production risk. So you have lots of good practices that are going on. You heard about a number of the innovations at Meristem and what they're doing to help improve the growth of crops. So it's everything from those bio-innovations to the types of practices that are going on in farms today and how those over the years have begun to further distinguish those that have not adopted best practices. And then you have the things that we see more and more often across a lot of industries, and that's the machine learning or artificial intelligence. Where does that become a part of this risk management world? So when I put together this, this box of uncertainty, it was to take all these things into account. And so you ask yourself, does the speed and adoption of technology continue to push down the effects of what could be higher and more frequent severe weather events, the likelihood of future black swan events. Everyone knows black swan events are these very sudden, unexpected, but events when they occur, we go, yeah, could have seen that coming a mile away. It's the 2008 financial crisis. There were a lot of leading indicators coming up to that. So what's the next black swan event? And what are the new risks? What are the things we're not even thinking about today that will affect production agriculture in the years ahead? All right, a lot going on in this slide too, but let's just start at the top. And if we think about a lot of what we're doing in ag today is about digitization. Digitization of processes and the collection of more information using new tools. So where you see enablers, we not only have equipment that is collecting information down at the sub-inch level about a seed going in the ground, but we have satellite imagery that will now be able to tell us everything that's going on at the field, with a great accuracy. But yet, one of the things that, and this is really a central point and something I've spent the better part of the last 15 years of my career, is this idea of cadastral field maps. Everyone knows what a common land unit is that is used by the federal government to determine a shape of a field. In almost every area of land management today, across the U.S. certainly, you have a digitized record of a lot, a commercial lot, a residential lot. Most areas have a digitized record. Ag doesn't have that. And yet we now are developing those capabilities to create a perfect digitization of a farm field. Why is that important? Well, it's because we're going to get more and more granular information from so many different sources, and they're going to all become connected with one another. But eventually, you have to be able to tie that to the land parcel, or we'll forever be in the spot that we are today with most of the risk management programs for farmers, which is at a county level, right? If you're under the federal crop program today, you know that everyone in the county with a certain crop and a certain product type is going to pay the same rate. There's no differentiation, even though there's a bottom quartile and there's a top quartile. Well, if in the future we're going to reward those that apply the best practices and want to give them the best products, the best types of risk management, then we have to tie it back down to that field level. And that's where the benefits come from it. So you not only will see better productivity and so forth, but you're now going to really bring risk exposure down to the individual field and that farmer. You're going to create customized solutions. Not one product fits all. You customize it to the farmer for their specific needs. And then most importantly, you begin to match price to risk, right? So it's really tying those things together. On the bottom part, you see the geo-referenced data at the sub-inch level. Again, this is what those really maps look like when you start to be able to identify this down at the field level. That slide, by the way, is something I stole from John Deere. I built it at John Deere when I was there. And we were trying to prove to everyone that that's where we needed to be almost 10 years ago. And it's been a struggle to move that along. But if you think about that data all being at that field level, and then moving to the middle, it's all going into very much a data centralized, web-based environment, and it moves to the right-hand side where we put it to work. And so I'll end by this, by saying, in the past, if you think about farming, and I've talked to thousands of farmers over the years, it always starts out with, I learned from my grandpa, my dad, and then we passed it on. So it was learning through the actions of others. That was kind of the experience phase. Then we moved into hiring agronomists and other experts to help us not only do what our parents told us to do or our grandparents told us to do, but now you had someone who was a specialist, and they started to give you more advice. Well, we're about to now move into, what is the final stage from science to math. And what does that mean? Well, we're going to take all this data that is being created at the sub-inch level to a parcel that has been digitized and start applying all the modeling techniques. And this is where AI and machine learning come in, to where we really try to maximize this and create solutions that are very, very much in alignment with whatever that particular operation might be. Thank you.
Nicely done. All right, Jeff. So policy impacts you, economy impacts you, risk management impacts you. The reason you're up here, brother, is because you actually are doing this every day. Maybe a few comments, and then we're going to open it up for panel discussion.
Well, I appreciate that. The first thing I'd say is I think Mitch put me up here because I'm a field filler, because I don't have the ability to be as worldly as these folks, but I thank you for the job you did. And what you
how many acres, my friend? I mean, come on.
That doesn't have anything to do with it.
It's good. Nice suck it up, but they're here anyway. Go ahead.
But anyhow, in listening to what everybody spoke about here today, the things that rattled through my mind and that are the most interesting to me are it's an evolution. There's things that are going on, and the reality that you speak about for us at the farm gate is something that is incredibly challenging. One of the last points that you made, when you talked about families and passing the experience down and all of that, I couldn't help but think of my own situation. And I thought, as a young farmer, I read an article. I think I was out of college a while ago, and it said something to the fact that it took 100 years for the amount of information that a farmer had to double. And I don't know what the current rate is, but there's some really smart people in the room that could tell me, and I think it's probably less than months today, which less than a couple decades ago was 100 years. So from where we're at today, it's one of those situations of how do we keep it real? How do we make it something that we can manage every day? How do we take it and disseminate it to our employees and put it in a model that ultimately makes us effective? And that sounds a lot better and a lot easier than it really is. We're real people trying to do a real job. And as we look at all of these things in the world that we're dealing with today, we still have our normal, what most farmers would say is a day job. And that takes up 90% or in some cases 100% of your time, and then you got to fit it in. But ultimately, the world that we live in today is fast moving, in trying to keep it real, in trying to develop our people and all that goes with it. I think the group here today is chasing something that truly identifies what's different. We have to do more with less. We have to grow more bushels with less. But all of these tools are, as the graphs show, are working, and it's real. It's stressful. There's a lot of times that it's less than clear. The things that concern me most are, from a regulatory standpoint, to the point on risk management, we can pull all of this data together, and there's somebody standing in the background with a bullseye, or with a gun with a bullseye in the back of our head, that are trying to prove you wrong. And when we put information into a system, they want the numbers to look the way the numbers look, and if something's off by a decimal point, you're guilty as charged. And we have to put ourselves in a situation to work together ultimately as an industry and take the things that we're learning, the experience that we're learning, but put ourselves in a position to defend ourselves in the public. And there's nothing more challenging as a farmer to be guilty until proven innocent versus the other. And as we go forward, that's probably the biggest challenge that I have in passing our message to our next generation coming up, and how you're going to manage the business and say, how do you promote what you're doing? How do you put yourself in a situation where within the global economy you're still competitive? You're still the safest, best, most refined food supply in the world, and yet the credibility that goes with that oftentimes downgraded or diminished, or somebody's saying, yeah, but we can get it cheaper somewhere else. And I don't know how, starting in Washington, we can foundationally have some of those types of things still be the drivers and be part of what's made us the greatest producer in the world. Rolling that forward, you know, we have the challenges with climate change and all that's going with that, people's eating habits, destroying demand. Once we give it up, we never get it back, or it takes generations to get it back sometimes, or at least at a minimum, way too much time. But we have to work together. We have to make it real. We have to not lose sight of the goal, and ultimately figure out a way to find people who are willing to lead, get out there and put themselves out front of it all, and not just be content with what the masses think is okay or mediocre. And that's the one thing that in the 40 years I've been in this business, agriculture, and the numbers showed it on some of those graphs, we've defied the odds forever. And we have to somehow figure out how to continue to do that. And with a group like this here today, it's pretty obvious that there's still some folks that can make it happen.
Thank you so much. Outstanding. All right.